Great. Hey, Matt, thanks for doing this tonight. Appreciate it. Can you introduce yourself a little? Tell me kind of what you do, what your goals were with training, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, so I'm Matt. I work as a therapist, so most of the days in a chair or because I'm with kids in weird angles as we play. And originally came to work with Matt because I thought my progress had stagnated a little bit. I wasn't making gains as far as the amount of weight I could lift. But then after working with Matt, started to realize I had a lot more problems around form and technique. And so that became a focus of my goals.
Yeah, perfect. So what were kind of some of the issues or that you were having with not making the progress? Like how did that affect you outside of the gym?
I don't know. I wasn't getting, I mean, it's frustrating for sure. I wasn't at the point where I was ready to give up or anything, but it's just something I like to do and want to do forever, and constantly seeing the progress, I think is important for maintaining the motivation over decades, hopefully.
Yeah, definitely the big picture mindset's a really good way to look at that. So in terms of framework, we basically used a couple key things. So when we done our initial assessment, we noticed that there weren't a ton of mobility restrictions. You did have one kind of shoulder, I'd say even more stability related restriction that we found. So we'd used a bit more of like a holistic postural approach with dealing with the mobility and stability side of things to improve your depth on the squats, your technique on your bench press, and just overall shoulder mobility so you could overhead press well without putting stress on the shoulder. And on top of that, just getting back into some high bar squatting in your program as well, and not having to be stuck with just front squats, right?
Yeah.
And then on a programming front, we used largely a fairly strength focused routine. We didn't build too much hypertrophy and volume work, just with your other goals with the martial arts and stuff as well. Generating too much fatigue would have been a bit counterproductive initially, especially as we're working through technique. So pretty strength focused, focusing on like a +2 -1 programming style. So 3 steps forward, 1 step back type idea. And we found that overall, would you say shoulders felt kind of better by even a month or 2 in there, and technique was feeling better as we went as well, right?
Yeah, correct. Especially on the overhead presses where I really noticed it because the stress it puts on the shoulder, they feel like great now.
Yeah.
And then we were doing, I forget, it was these presses. And in the beginning,
single arm,
I mean,
the bottoms up kettlebell
yeah,
presses.
and that's where I really could feel that immobility. It would wobble around everywhere, and now I can just go straight up. So it was a huge improvement.
Yeah. What was really interesting for me is we have kind of a spectrum of like mobility over here, stability over here, right? The more stable you get, the more locked up you'll get basically. But somewhere in that middle zone is where a lot of people tend to do their best, where they have enough mobility to get to the ranges of motion that we're trying to get to. So like if we laid on the ground, for example, and tested your shoulders, we found you did all right, especially if we played around with some positions and kind of moved rib cage around a bit. But then if we get people too far on the mobility side of the spectrum where, for example, they're dislocating shoulders, popping their hips out all the time, or just super loosey-goosey, when we put them under load, it almost looks like they don't have mobility because their body tends to kind of lock up on them, right? And that was part of one of the reasons why we did a lot more stability-based stuff at the start of training. Even though we didn't necessarily do a bunch of shoulder stretches, your overhead mobility certainly got better.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, cool. So over the course of the about 5 months that we worked together, what were kind of the biggest results that you noticed from the training?
So I practice jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai, which is where I hope to apply most of the gains we were getting. People were noticing just a lot more strength as far as the jiu-jitsu holds. And then in the Muay Thai, that the strikes were coming a lot harder. So I was able to see it there. And then just noticing in the beginning the pretty huge asymmetries that I had in various joints and between the left and right, and noticing those decrease over time. That was a very good marker, I thought, as far as progress. And so that was cool to see.
Yeah, and for longevity, that's huge as well. Just not being overly favoring of one side.
Yeah, well, and I noticed that I think it was like the second month when I was doing the yard work and injured my back because I was at a weird angle. And
Yeah.
so working your program while having that happen really brought home, hey, if I want to do this forever, weird angles and bad technique are not going to help me do that. And so, um, yeah, I think this will help keep me going.
Yeah, awesome. And then on the strength standpoint, I was looking at my notes here, and the biggest thing I noticed is, we'll say form aside, with your bench press. So your bench when you came in was touch and go, so no pause on the chest, and you're repping around 215 for 5, and you've since repped that with a pause, with a 2 count pause, actually.
Was it 2 count? Cool. Yeah, I had no idea
Yeah.
about the pause, so I trained with you, but man, that makes things so much harder. I
Oh
really
yeah.
like learning just that little thing.
Yeah, and for like again, just going back to that whole stability mobility thing, it builds so much stability and strength off the chest. Your bench has like the technique has been leaps and bounds ahead of where it was, and even with the harder variations, you're benching more than you were before. So it's a big win in my books.
Yeah, definitely. Cool.
Cool. So you'd mentioned that sort of one of the big lessons you learned sort of along the way with the coaching process is you've got to be on top of, being conscious about your day-to-day movements on top of just your regular training when you're thinking about awkward angles and just longevity and not getting injured all the time. Were there any other big lessons that you learned along the way with the coaching?
Well, yeah, a little bit unrelated to that. So over the years, I've kind of developed a strong suspicion, I guess, of the health and fitness industry and the pseudoscience and just things I don't personally like. And so I've avoided personal training my whole life. 38, and I've been exercising since I was on a track team in kindergarten and just avoided the whole thing. And then I took a chance and I did find there was people out there using evidence-based principles, not trying to sell another pill or something that you can work with. And so for me, actually, that was one of the biggest lessons was just to kind of get interested in the overall industry again and the whole kind of more community aspect or social aspects of things.
Right on. Yeah, I appreciate that. So what would you tell others if they were in the same situation as you, sort of before you'd started training, where you'd had sort of some nagging issues with your shoulders or just sort of injuries in the past and strength had plateaued?
Um, well, the little exercises I think work quite well, which was something that surprised me a little bit. So I thought coming in as powerlifting kind of program, so it'll be just big bar stuff. But I actually ended up enjoying all the little single leg things and the twisting things and the things to get that stability a little better. They ended up kind of becoming the highlight of the training during the day. I would often laugh as I stumbled through them. And so I think, finding someone who's really good with things beyond just the weight, someone who understands posture and movement on top of just weightlifting is a huge thing to look for when trying to find a trainer or coach.
Perfect. Cool. And any final thoughts or things you want to add to the conversation here?
Um, no, not really. Just that I was actually also surprised the online thing, which I didn't think would work well, actually worked quite well for training. And I thought it would be a lot more involved with just having the video feedback and all the little interaction in between. It made it a very effective form of delivering the training.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, it worked a lot to get it to that point where it's not just like, here's some videos, good luck.
Yeah.
That feedback was found very effective.
Yeah, that was awesome. It really added, I think, a touch that I thought would be missing from an online training. It added that kind of personal feedback that you get in person. So that was really good.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much, Matt. Appreciate it. And I'll talk with you later. Okay.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right.